TM.
Well, welcome everyone, and we're continuing with my analysis of my chess playing performance at this year's British Chess Championships, the 2019 British Championships in Torquay, and I'm having a look at what I did right, what I did wrong, but also really quite importantly how I can improve for the future from some of the mistakes I may have made. And this is the most important thing, not to make the same mistake twice, and to try to move forwards and to always improve. And this is a good idea in life as it is in chess. Now, in round 4, I was paired against, I believe, the Lithuanian player originally, but obviously now lives in England, Antanas Zapolskis. And again, I hope I pronounced that reasonably well. And Antanas is an international master. I had the black pieces. He's a reasonably low rating for an international master, I think around the 2300 mark, but still a very dangerous player. And in this game, I decided not to play the French defense after my loss in round 2, and I went after e4 for the modern. And if you want to know more about this opening, you can buy Tiger's Modern DVD from the Ginger GM shop. The world's leading expert there takes you over the ideas that you should be playing on the black side of this opening. And this is one of the most exciting ways to play against e4. You get very interesting, unbalanced positions where any result's possible. Now, my personal, opinion of this opening is that, it's an opening you play for a win. And I don't think it's generally, if white knows loads of theory, just not quite good enough to equalize. But you always get some interesting chances, maybe as you do in the modern Benoni against d4 and the King's Indian even in some lines. So it's a very, very interesting way to play. And it suits my style, messy, unbalanced. Now, we had the standard position after d6, and here when I was preparing for my opponent, so when you prepare, use chess base, and if you're a serious player and you're starting to play tournaments, you should try to do this as well. I searched my opponent's name, and I searched the position after 1g6. So this is what I do. I make a search of all games he's played in this position, and it came up with, in this structure here, he often plays the move, I believe it was g4. So I prepared for this move, and I was quite looking forward to playing against this because it's a very double-edged. He opens his king move, but my opponent kind of shocked me by playing bishop to e3. So it was a good psychological move, getting me out of my pre-preparation. I continued with the main idea in this line, and this is why it's called Tiger's Modern. This is one of the main ideas Swedish Grandmaster Tiger Hillip Persson used and developed. And the idea of this little move is to attack with b5 and b4, getting a very interesting and unbalanced structure. My opponent now played a4 in this position, and this stops b5. And I should now play b6 before my opponent has a chance to play a5. For example, let's just say I play knight d7. a5 is a bit uncomfortable for me. I don't ever want to move my b pawn now because my pawn structure becomes quite bad and my a6 pawn becomes quite weak. So b6 is the correct move to play. My opponent now continuing very normally with queen d2, getting ready for if I castle, bishop b7, and now f3. And here, this is one thing I've got to try to improve. Generally, my memory in chess, my memory, I think, in real life is not so good, but spatial recognition things, patterns and stuff like that, it's generally quite good, but it's still not as good as maybe it used to be. And it's something I need to train up by having a healthier life and just looking at my games more. And in this position, I had a long think, and I was thinking about c5 and other moves. In the end, I played knight to f6. Only after the game did I recall that in actual fact, in 2018, I had this position against the Indian player Kh1, and in that game I played e6, and this move is a much better and more flexible move. One of the main points of this move is that, let's say white plays a move such as knight to h3, a move like this. we can now go knight to f6. And if, unlike the game, my opponent, well, like the game, if my opponent tries bishop h6, which is clearly his main idea, a nice tactical point. Can you see the tactical point here? And this is one reason we put the pawn on e6. The tactical point is now knight takes e4. And we have a queen h4 check, which will net ourselves a pawn and the dart squares. So pretty much a winning position. So I couldn't believe afterwards that I've had this position before and played what I think is a better move, e6, quite flexible move. I totally forgot about this at the board. So, you know, it goes to show that my memory is maybe not as good as I thought. You know, often I can recall games from 20 years ago, but not from a year ago. I don't know why that is. So instead, I played knight to f6. Now, I'm not sure about this move. I don't really like it. My opponent played very logically. He played very well for a lot of this game. He played bishop h6. I have no tactic now because my queen is stuck by the e-pawn. But my idea, and it was a bad idea, was to eliminate that bishop. And now I must do something. And I thought I should strike out the center. And my idea was e5. And here, oh, okay, this looks quite interesting. I've got knight d7 coming, maybe castle queenside. But only after my opponent now took on e5 and very quickly played bishop c4, I started to get very worried about my position here, because I suddenly realized my king is in a lot of danger and I don't have the best places for my, and there is a very strong idea my opponent has. Can you see that idea? It's to do with his last undeveloped piece. Where could that head to? You know, that would be the knight on g1. Knights and bishops come out first. And also, when you're developing your pieces, you want to put them on squares where they create threats. And I suddenly saw here that the idea of my opponent bringing his knight to g5, pressure against f7, was looking very scary, with queen g7 coming in and rook d1. So I had to have a long think here. Maybe I thought for half an hour, because something I'd say is very important for yourselves as well, and this is why don't just play blitz. It's not a good way to improve chess, but if you're playing serious games, you're serious about improving. If you start to realize, you've got to sense the danger, and here I sense the danger. I start to realize if I don't spend a lot of time overcoming the problems here, I'm going to lose. So I need to, critical moment of the game, you need to take more time at the critical moment. And I came up with an idea which I wasn't particularly happy with, but I didn't see much option. Knight to d7, knight to h3. Now I put my knight here mainly to defend e5, and now I played knight g8. Now this is not a move you really want to play, you know, of course, but I really was very afraid about my opponent's queen being in my guts here, and I wanted to force it backwards. And the idea why I put the knight here on d7 first is that the critical line is queen g7, and the big think I had allowed me to work out the following line where I can play queen f6. Obviously, as my king is in more danger and my opponent's queen is very active, I want to exchange queens in this position. If the queens are exchanged, it gets rather equal. I'm happy with that. And the tactical thing my opponent can try here is bishop takes f7 check, queen takes f7. My opponent now can take the rook, so it may look like he's won material, but I simply now play castles queenside. And I have the idea now in this position of going knight to f6, winning his queen, and you can see why I need my knight defending the pawn on e5. If knight to g5, this is nothing to worry about. Let me just get my bearings. Queen e7 is the key move, and I had to work all this out, attacking his knight. And if he goes knight takes h7, knight does eventually win his queen. So I needed to find a way out of these positional problems with tactics, and this is often something you need to do, and you need to be double sure when you play them. So my opponent now went backwards to e3, and again I tried to exchange queens. I went with a check, knight f2, queen h6, because I'm still a bit scared here. I'm behind in development, and I'm definitely slightly worse still here. The opening idea of playing e5 was terrible, something I won't do again. My opponent now kept the queens on, and here I played knight f6. My opponent castled, and in this position I had a long think, and I thought, well, now my queen's not very well placed, and I spent more time bringing it back to a more central role where it'd be much more important in the game, maybe coming over to these squares. My opponent now played rather strangely here. I mean, had he just played general principles, he's developed his pieces, he's castled, there's an open file. If he continues with general ideas of rook d1, let's say queen e7, rook d2, or rook d3, something like this, then I must be worse, because he's got very nice control of this file. Not massively worse, because I'm quite solid. It's still a game, and I think I've done well to avoid any serious problems here. I can castle, thank goodness, but I am worse. Instead, my opponent played knight d3, and I was happy to see this because it's not a great square for the knight. And after queen e7, f4, so he's trying to blow me away, but I'm actually quite solid here, and I just avoided anything by castling, and I was quite happy here because by playing this move, these pawns have become a bit weaker. And he now played another mistake, knight d5, and the problem with this is that after I take that knight off, I'm able to play e4, and around here I suddenly became very confident. I've managed to survive the opening by fighting hard. I realized I was in danger. I needed to spend time to find myself out of those dangers. And again, the way I worked this out is just thinking of my opponent's ideas. His pieces look quite scary, so I was thinking, what can he do to increase his pressure? I saw his plan and I stopped it. This is something that a lot of players don't do. They don't worry about their opponent's ideas so much until it's too late. You've got to get out of that habit. Now here my opponent played f5. He's trying to use this pawn to create problems, but after rook on e8 I have a very strong pawn myself, and his bishop is trapped by his pawn on d5, so his pieces aren't very well placed to make this successful for him. I've now broken the pin, so I'm threatening his knight, and he played rook on e1, reinforcing the pin, and now I played knight to f6. This is a weak pawn. I attack this pawn. King h1, getting out of any checks, and now just queen d6. And again, I'm threatening to take the knight now. The knight has to move, and here I just played a5 because in some lines that pawn can be taken, and this gives me a nice pawn structure, as we will see later on. One important thing here is that his bishop is very bad. It's trapped behind the pawn, but he's also got two pawns fixed, meaning they can't move on light squares. So any endings with light square bishops, my bishop can attack his pawns on the queen side, but his bishop can't attack mine because they're on the wrong coloured squares. So bishop b5 now played, and my rook comes to a good square, and now he took on g6, and he played c4. Now this is the only way he could defend his pawn on d5, but again I'm quite happy to see this in a positional sense. Why? His bishop is now hard to get back into the game. It's trapped offside, and he's fixed another pawn on a light square. So again, you might have seen this in another game. Well, we'll see this in my round 8 game. His pawn structure is very bad here, and any ending is going to be good for me. I play king g7. Now there's no rush here. I just need to improve my pieces. Another file has opened up, so why don't I put a rook on that file? Queen f2, and again, always watch out for what my opponent's trying to do. Well, my knight is well defended, so I don't have to worry. Rook h8, let's improve my pieces. Queen g3, this is good maneuvering for my opponent. He brings his queen to a much better square. And now bishop c8, I like this move. All my pieces are quite good except for this bishop, because the bishop is trapped against the pawn on d5. Maybe I have something more forcing here, I don't know, but I don't need to. If you just improve your pieces, that there's no rush. And by playing this, my thought at the time was, well, okay, he's always going to be a piece down now because this piece is not doing anything. And this bishop can be useful coming over this way. h3, good move. Again, I think this is needed to be played. And now rook f5, knight to e2, and here I went for an ending, and my opponent has defended well, and the reason I went for the ending is because of the things I stated before, his pawn structure. My pawns are all quite safe. Rook h4 defends that pawn, and he can't get his bishop in the game, and these pawns, they can't move, they're locked. Now you might be thinking, yes, but your pawns are locked, Simon. Yes, they are, but they can't easily be attacked. His knight can't come in and attack these pawns, And his bishop certainly can't attack my pawns. His rook can't attack my pawns, but in the long run, his pawns can be attacked. Some point, my bishop will be able to attack them. At some point, my knight has some great squares around those pawns. Think if I can get my knight to any of these squares, they sort of dance and I can attack them. So I also have this passed e-pawn. So I'm a little bit better here, but not much. Now, king e1, and again, this now thinks about, can I do anything immediate? If you can't do anything immediate and your opponent's not threatening anything, you should improve your pieces. How can I improve my pieces here? Well, let's have a look at them. My rook is okay, my knight is okay, my bishop is okay. In the ending, the king becomes a very important piece. So I need to do something with this king. King to f8. And again, my king can also come in and attack these pawns or come to support my pawns. So it's a very strong king. King g1, and both of our kings come into the position. King e3, and now it's better to support my central pawn here. Knight to f1, and this was a key mistake. In this position, maybe it's a bit tricky for him anyway, because if I can get my pawn to f5, things obviously are looking very good. But this seems a bit passive to me. I went knight d7, and this is getting ready for my f-pawn to move. King to f2, f5, and now my opponent played knight to d2, threatening a check here. Again, even in positions where you're controlling it, there's always tricks. Always watch out for your opponent's last move. Where did he move his piece? What's his idea? It's clear this is it. So king d6, and now he played a very clever move, knight to f3, and this, it was around the time control here. I saw if I took this knight, he comes in with a check. I have to go here, he comes in with another check. He takes on c7, and this is very messy, and I think I'm just worse here. I feel like, you know, if we go back, after knight to f3, I still have all the positives in the position. My pawns are very nice. My opponent's pawns are very bad. So I don't need to complicate here. So just rook to h8. And here is the key mistake. Now, I am better. I'm pretty sure about this. But have a think. What would you do in my opponent's shoes here? And this is kind of key. You know, I'm making progress, but what would you do if you're white here? And again, pause if you need to. And again, this is not necessarily a tactical game, it's more positional, but we need to be able to play positional chess to improve as a player. Well, in the game, my opponent moved his knight. He went knight g5, and this is a big error. It was so important here, or at some point around here, to eliminate my knight. Get rid of this bishop, which is really not doing anything, and my knight has such great potential. You've got to realize the potential of your opponent's pieces, and if my knight has a chance, as it does in the game, to fly in to e5, c5, it's so much stronger than the bishop. So as a rule, if you have an opportunity to swap a bishop for a knight, minor piece for a minor piece, knight for knight, always think which piece is better, mine or my opponent's. Well, here in white shoes, should be thinking that my knight is better than his bishop, so get rid of that knight. Now I still have good chances here after bishop takes d7, because as I stated, these pawns are on light squares and my bishop can aim for them. But after knight g5, it's not entirely clear. I have to watch out for this check. I'm not sure. Let's say rook f8, and after b3, maybe something like king here. My king can come in and attack these, but he's got good drawing chances here. If we compare this to the game, again, this is one of the main errors that my opponent played. Everything's been okay up to here. After knight g5, I now was very happy to play knight e5, which stops the threat and keeps this spider knight. And now my opponent is lost. He completely collapsed here. I also have a very strong threat of rook h5, trapping that knight, which he can't do much about. And this one move has cost him. He got a bit desperate. He played c5 check, but it was very hard anyway. I took that one. He played g3, and okay, he wants to go h4 to defend his knight, but now c4, and his bishop is still proving to be a horrible trapped piece. King e3, I went 2 pawns up. His rook can't get into the position. Again, make sure you try to stop all your opponent's counterplay, but I'm controlling all of these squares here. So now I'm also threatening pawn to c6, and it's game over. He played, okay, bishop a6, but he had one more check, and after knight d3, he resigned. So there were some interesting moments there. I mean, it was quite tough. I got a bad position, but if you get a bad position out the opening, you know, don't give up. You've got to fight. When the pressure's on you, try to look at ways to force my opponent's queen away, get rid of his active pieces. I took my chance with my e-pawn in that game, and later on my opponent missed the opportunity to get rid of my good knight. So always consider these exchanges. People go on about how much better the bishop is than the knight. Bobby Fischer said that I think the bishop was worth 3.3 and the knight 3. Now this may be the case, but it really depends on the situation. You know, every position is different, so don't get stuck into ways of thinking which are not fluid. You've got to be fluid, and that was one case there where my opponent should have taken off my knight. Now the tournament standings, let's have a look. So this is round 4. We're coming near the halfway mark. It's a 9-round tournament. We can see Richard Palliser got another bye there. Amazing. Now in the there was a draw. Mickey Adams was held to a draw by Ravi Harrier, so it's 3.5 is the leading score. So we have Mickey, Ravi, David Howe, Justin Tan, and Richard Palliser. I'm in that group just half a point now off the lead after that win on board 6, but I have the white pieces tomorrow. So can I come clawing my way to the top of the British Championships? Can I get a good prize or even become British champion? Time will tell. I hope you found that video instructive, and I will finish off this series on my British Championship journey as we go along. So thank you for watching, and I'll be back again soon. Cheers for now.